Well, there's a lot to talk about in this bill, and I'll go through why and how this bill is actually not going to help young people get into housing, the failures in the bill, and also the plans that the coalition are putting forward. But let's be very clear to start with. This legislation is built on broken promises. This Prime Minister promised repeatedly, this Treasurer, every member opposite promised their communities that they would not change capital gains tax, they would not change negative gearing. They have all broken faith with their communities. It means that going forward, it doesn't matter what they say. It's irrelevant because no one can trust any word that comes out of the mouth of any government minister or any backbencher, and that's the reality that they have to live with. It's interesting that they've decided at a time where there is distrust in the political system that they thought the best way to earn trust was to break trust. But that, again, is a decision that they will all have to live with, because the reality is these changes aren't actually about making housing easier. They are not about intergenerational equity or fairness. As I said, they will actually make the situation worse for young people. The Treasury Secretary, Jenny Wilkinson, let the cat out of the bag by accident, I assume, last week when she said, and I quote, "Revenue needs to be raised from somewhere." And that is the reality of this broken promise by this government. It's about raising more revenue for their spending program. $77 billion in increased revenue this government is taking. And that $77 billion in increased revenue, that's taxes. That's more taxes on the Australian people, on mums and dads, on single parents, on families, on small business owners, community members doing their best, 19, 20-year-olds trying to get ahead. More taxes are coming for you under this government. But as a coalition, we want you to keep more of your money when you work hard and you get a pay increase, or you work overtime. As you get paid more, you have to pay more tax through bracket creep. But the coalition has committed to indexing the tax rate to make sure that bracket creep does not happen. So every time you get a pay rise, you will automatically get a tax cut. Now, there's been lots of questions and lots of talk about tests this week. Well, there's a test coming for those opposite, because there will be an amendment to this legislation that will put that tax-back guarantee to the vote this week. And every member opposite will have a choice. They talk about supporting workers. Well, if you want to support workers, you sustainably and systematically support them by indexing the tax brackets. Will they vote for lower taxes, or will they vote for higher taxes? We're about to find out from this government, because that will make tangible differences every time you get a pay rise. Not waiting 12 months, begging the Treasurer, "Please, sir, I want some more. Please give me a tax cut." You will get it no matter what. And it will force governments to be honest. It will force governments to either spend responsibly, or if they want to increase taxes, go to the Australian people and explain it to the Australian people on why they are increasing your taxes. No more smoke and mirrors from this government. And in addition, we'll have a Future Generations Fund, which will make sure that, again, governments are held accountable and are honest. The trick that this Treasurer likes to play when it comes to revenue is they set a price for commodities, and yes, rightly it should be conservative, but they set a price, and then when the price comes in higher and they collect more revenue, this Treasurer spends it all, spends it on his vanity projects, not in the best interest of the Australian people. And what the coalition have said is our Future Generations Fund, if there is an increase in the tax take because of commodity prices, 80% as a minimum will be locked away to pay off debt, to support the future generations of this country, and to invest in nation-building infrastructure that will actually drive productivity and economic growth in this country. And of that investment in infrastructure, 25% will go to the regions, because they represent 25% of our country. They deserve their fair share, but they also deliver so many benefits. They feed our country. They are a huge exporter in this country, so it's right that regional Australians get looked after. And that also will instil discipline on governments. they will not just be able to spend those revenue upgrades that they've had nothing to do with. It's the only way these Treasurer's books have looked any better is because of bracket crease and commodity prices that he's had nothing to do with, and he's spent it and he's wasted it all. This will put fiscal discipline back into the budget. But we will also make sure that we tie migration to housing, because housing is about supply and it's about demand. And the worst part about this legislation, and the member for Blair who's now left talked about the budget papers, well, the budget papers confirm that these tax changes will deliver 35,000 less houses for the Australian people. The government's own papers confirm that their changes to negative gearing and capital gains tax will deliver less houses for the Australian people. Yet we have the Prime Minister and the Treasurer, the Housing Minister, the member for Blair, those following will say the same thing. It's all about supply. Well, these changes will make it worse. And we saw this week the RBA confirmed through a paper that was found through FOIs that the government wanted hidden that migration is a key part of housing prices. And it also showed that in the first 4 years of this government, they have failed the Australian people when it comes to housing. It's what we already know. It's what every Australian already knows. And I mean, the question for the Minister for Housing is what's next? Shuffled out of Home Affairs because the minister failed, now in housing but clearly failed, so let's see where the minister's shuffled to next. But we also know that backing small business is so crucial, because small business is the engine room of the economy. Small business creates jobs, it helps families, it helps communities. Spend a lot of time at sporting clubs in my community. There are a lot of sponsorship signs on the sides of those grounds, and they're small businesses, family businesses in my community, not big businesses. And that's why we will have the instant asset write-off increased to $50,000 and put in permanently so business has that certainty to invest, driving productivity and economic growth. But when it comes to these capital gains taxes, it will cruel small businesses that want to get ahead, particularly startups. Startups start, one of their ideas is that they want to sell, they want to get bought out. They are looking to increase significantly, and these tax changes will decimate founders and tech startups and small businesses. But it's not just the owners that will pay the price. Those young people that are working at a large corporate organisation or straight out of university that don't want to start a business but want to work in a small business or a startup take stock options. It's something I did when I left Mars and a corporate career to go to a tech startup. Now, stock options means you're taking generally less salary, but you're taking a part of that business, hoping that that business will continue to grow and be successful. But under these changes, young people will be punished for joining startups and taking stock options. It's going to make it harder for founders to recruit talent. Well, it already has made it harder, because founders are talking about young people rescinding offers and saying, no, I can't come and join you because of the uncertainty of these capital gains tax changes. That is impacting small businesses and the tech sector today. But there is also young people that took the risk 5 or 6 years ago. They started at a tech startup, they've been there for 4 or 5 years, they've built options, they are literally on the verge of listing and going public, and their hard work is about to pay off so they can get a deposit for their house. And these changes have undermined all that hard work, because suddenly the tax has been changed for them. But we also know that we need to continue to support people, and the process of how we do this, these complicated tax changes, is important. This government is rushing this through, and they are going to try and play a political game here this week. The backbench are going to wave it through because they're not allowed to have their own opinion, otherwise they get kicked out like Senator Payman. But it's the Australian people and it's the community that really pays the price. And I want to quote from John Keogh, the economics editor at the AFR, former Treasury official, about this process and about this Prime Minister. Costello, and I quote, "Costello and Keating were interested in the principles of good tax policy. Chalmers and Anthony Albanese don't seem to care. It appears to be all about politics. They don't have the political skills, technical understanding or policy interests to explain complicated tax policies to voters like Costello and Keating did. They are approaching the task like student politicians they once were. That sums up very well from a former Treasury official John Kerr, the economics editor. I mean, we also see last week in The Australian that government backbenchers were confirming that they didn't understand the changes that were happening. They themselves do not understand the tax changes that are happening. They're taking the word of the Prime Minister and the Treasurer. Good luck with that. So what chance do business owners have? What chance do small businesses have to understand these changes if government backbenchers are going to vote for them, sight unseen, unknown? In their own words, they don't understand it. And that's probably why they don't understand that it's going to make it worse. 35,000 less houses will be built because of the changes to the negative gearing and capital gains. As I said, this is the Treasury's own words, so they're actually going to make this situation worse. But as a coalition, we know that supply is a key part of the housing challenge, and that's why we're investing and committing $5 billion to build that critical infrastructure that will get more houses into the system. It will get more houses built. It'll actually make it easier for young people to get into a house. And we have a lot of spin from this government. One of the lines they like to use is that they're consulting. I mean, we've had Premier Minns, Premier Cook, both Labor premiers, say that this budget needs to change and is wrong. The member for Parramatta, the member for Bennelong, the member for Chifley have all spoken out against these changes. They've forced the Prime Minister to admit that he's going to consult. However, we know that this is going to be a sham consultation because the Treasurer himself confirmed it in his own speech, where he literally contradicted himself when he gave his speech introducing the bill. And let me explain to those business owners and small business owners that are hoping this government might listen. They're not listening. And I'm going to quote the Treasurer. Returning to indexation across all asset classes ensures investments are treated in a neutral way and that we don't create a new distortion. There it is. The Treasurer confirming that he does not want to make any changes. He does not want to create a new distortion. But then the height of this person, in the same speech, he contradicts himself. As outlined in the budget, and I quote again, as outlined in the budget papers, the government is consulting with stakeholders on the treatment of capital gains of small and start-up businesses. Well, Treasurer, you can't have it both ways. You're either having no distortions or you're consulting. Again, this Treasurer either does not understand his own policy, his own economic plans, or he's misleading the Australian people and small businesses and start-ups in this country. But we see it again in the fine print. Another quote from the same speech by this Treasurer. Where appropriate, these details will be finalised in subsequent legislation following consultation. Where appropriate. Fair chance after they rush this through, the Treasurer is not going to think any changes are appropriate, and he's been misleading the business community, start-ups, his own backbench. But even then, can we really trust this Treasurer? Can we trust this Prime Minister? A Prime Minister that said, "My word is my bond," that said he wouldn't break faith with the Australian people, which has continued. He has continued again and again, time after time, to break faith with the Australian people. The hubris, the arrogance, the disrespect to the Australian people is staggering. It will stain his legacy as a Prime Minister. It will stain the legacy of all those opposite that blatantly misled their communities at the last election, blatantly walked into their caucus and sat quietly and followed orders from the Prime Minister and the Treasurer. They've betrayed themselves, they've betrayed their communities, they've betrayed the Australian people. And just like Icarus, when hubris catches you, you pay the price.
Authorised by Aaron Violi, Liberal Party, Lilydale.